We're now going to look at the sculptures that were placed inside of the pediments at the Temple of Aphaea. Typical Greek temples had a front and a back pediment. So a pediment at the front and a pediment at the back. And both of these pediments would have been filled with statues. The statues would have told us who the temple was dedicated to, or they might illustrate scenes from ancient Greek mythology. The Temple of Aphaea had a front and back temple that showed scenes from the Trojan War. Now, the reason why we look at the Temple of Aphaea and its pediments is because we have quite a few surviving pieces, and here they are. So we're looking at the west pediment and the east pediment. Technically, the east pediment was the front of the temple, and the west pediment was the back of the temple. And here we have, in restored format, the fragments of the statues that were placed inside of the pediment, and you can see the rise of the roof line follows the rise and fall of the figures. The front and back, or the east and the west pediment, both featured scenes from the Trojan War, in which the Greek soldiers were fighting their enemies of Troy. And so we see the battle raging on either side of a central figure, the central figure being Athena. Now, in the story of the Trojan War, Athena was on the side of the Greeks. She supported the Greeks against the people of Troy. Here, she stands watching over this battle scene. Now, you might be thinking, why is a temple dedicated to Aphaea featuring Athena? Well, the people on the island of Aphaea are under the protection of the city-state Athens. And the patron god of Athens is Athena. And here we see the west pediment and the east pediment, exactly the same, with Athena in the middle and the chaos on either side. You might think this is boring. Why not switch it up? Put something different on the east pediment than the west pediment. No. Remember, it's all about balance. And the balance of the east pediment and the west pediment is harmony, and harmony is perfection, and that is appropriate for a temple. We art historians, love looking at the Temple of Aphaea because so many of the statuary remains, and a tragedy happened, which helps us see the transition or the advancements in the Archaic period in the understanding of the body. What are you talking about, Miss Cortez? Okay. The west pediment and the east pediment were built at the same time, and then a fire broke out, and it destroyed the statues in the east pediment, and they were then recarved and put back up 40 years later. So what we have is the west pediment is older than the east pediment. And while they are depicting the same scenes, we see an advancement in understanding of body and movement and anatomy from the older west pediment and 40 years later in the east pediment. So we're going to look at a few of these figures in order to appreciate this advancement in understanding of the body that we see happening in the late Archaic period. Oh, because I wanted to remind you that the statues would also have been painted. This is a reconstruction of the Temple of Aphaea, and some of the pigment analysis and patterns have been recreated here these computer graphics. So this here was Athena, and then this here is a Trojan soldier. Look at this. So this is the surviving statue of Athena, and then ultraviolet light shows the pigments that are still in the porous marble, and you can see how they created this beautiful texture. And then it's been recreated in this piece here. Isn't it beautiful? I also love this because look at the attention to the anatomy of Athena. We have her back, we have her buttocks. I mean, let's pause and think about this. This statue would have been placed way above our heads, and we would not even be able to be that close to it because not only is it way above us, but we're located way behind those walls. So why would the artist take the time to sculpt this figure in the round with a front and a back, and then give it the dedication or attention to detail to define her back and her rear? Nobody's going to see this. It's against a building way up high, far away from us. Why is the artist doing this? It's because this is not for you. This is not for me. This is for the goddess herself. And the elevation of the sculptures in that pediment is no hindrance to her. You are putting in the time and the dedication to this statue to make it the best it can be, because it's going to be going on to her temple. Does that make sense? This is so impressive, right? Oh, it's just beautiful. I'm going to be attaching a video beneath this that goes into the details of how these statues would have been brightly painted. But let's focus in on our figures. We're going to look first at the older west pediment, and then we're going to look at the newer east pediment, and we're going to look at the same type of figure, a dying warrior. So let's look at this guy first. Here he is. This is your next artwork. This is the dying warrior from the west pediment. This is the older of the pediments. And we see him, he's fallen. He is tearing an arrow out of his chest. Now, the arrow has been reconstructed here. It would have been a real metal arrow that would have been placed in this statue to help create this more lifelike experience. He most likely would have been wearing some kind of a helmet on that curly head of hair. That helmet would have maybe covered up some of his face. And then if we look here, his arm is resting on the floor, and then what's missing of his fingers indicates he might have been holding something. Is it his shield? Has he fallen down and his left hand is still holding on to his shield as he uses his right hand to pull an arrow out of his chest? This is gruesome, right? But that's what this is. It's a battle against Troy. And we see this battle playing out on either side of Athena. In terms of the anatomy, oh, beautiful, right? I mean, we should be impressed by the attention to muscles and tendons. Look at this ankle here. Look at that calf muscle. Look at the attention to the movement and the twist of the figure as he tries to push himself up on his elbow and then pry that. Look at the ribs. Remember when we were so excited when we looked at the Minoan harvester vase and we saw the ribs? Look at these ribs here. Look at that muscle on the shoulder into the torso. So we're seeing a great attention to musculature, much more naturalistic, right? He's positioned here at the edge so that as the triangle shape of the pediment comes down, his head and then his body kind of fits nicely or tucks nicely into that corner. And then he's very flat because he's pressed into the shallow space of the pediment. So he's got his short shield over here. He's pulling it out, and he's kind of laying flat against the side of the building. Okay, let's look at what happens 40 years later. Oh, here, look at that. See, he's looking forward. Look at the twist of his legs. Now let's move 40 years ahead in time. Remember, I said that the east pediment was damaged in a fire and they had to rebuild it. In the time period between the construction of the west pediment and the east pediment, we're going to see some dramatic changes in the attention to anatomy and the natural movement of the body. Here he is, the dying warrior of the east pediment. So we still see a dying warrior, and he too has his shield in his left hand, and he too is prying out an arrow with his right hand, prying it out of his chest. He is different in that his helmet still remains on. So if there was a fake helmet on the other guy, this helmet is carved onto his face. So he's got his helmet. Okay. He is also tucked away on the corner of the pediment, right? And his feet and his body angled down following the pitch of the roof, right? Look at him in here. Look at the details. If we were in class, I would be showing these to you so that we can do a comparison of the two dying warriors. Look at that leg placement. Here we are looking from below, looking up at him. Wow. Wow, 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 right? So now let's do that comparison. Let's do a little compare and contrast of these two figures. I'm trying to figure out where to stick myself. I'll just go right here on the side. Okay, so how are they similar? How are they different? Well, they're similar in that they're both carved of marble. They're both dying warriors. They both got shot in the chest by an arrow and they're pulling it out. Okay. What's different? How about the placement of their legs? The east pediment, the later of the two, his legs are outstretched and they're not folded in on each other. The west pediment, he's very flat, and to maintain that shallow space, the artist folded his back leg over the front leg. It creates a very unnatural, almost display of his body. Whereas the east pediment, his body twists as he struggles to pull this arrow from his chest, right? What else did you notice that was different about these two? The veins. Isn't that amazing? Look at that. The attention to not only the muscles, but there's these veins that pulse through his body. His body is still full of adrenaline during battle. And again, this is not something that we would have seen. We're too far away. This is not for us. This is for the goddess. So we see a better sense of anatomy, attention to skeletal structure and movement, muscle structure, muscle movement, and veins. Ah, it's beautiful, beautiful. What about his face? Both of them have that smile? The archaic smile. Is it because they're happy to be dying? No. It is because they are warriors dying in battle, and therefore they are dying at the height of their glory. So we do see the archaic smile in both of them. However, art historians have also interpreted the east pediment as kind of like a wince, like he's wincing in pain. You can think of that. I'm kind of on the fence about it. I don't know if I agree if it's a smile or a wince, but it does imply a little bit more naturalism to this painful moment. Also, notice how he's twisting almost like he's falling off this pediment. Not only is he dying, but he's collapsed onto the ground and he's struggling to stay up here on this pediment. It breaks reality. It's not just a story, but it's him activating the space beneath him. Like he could tumble out of this architecture and into our space. So what we're seeing at the end of the Archaic period in architecture and in sculpture is a greater activation of space and attention to anatomy. Did you write that down? What we see happening from the beginning to the end of the Archaic period is this development of the body and the activation of space. That figure twisting to activate beneath him. The bend of the elbows to activate the sides. This is all going to then be amplified as we continue into the classical Greek world.